Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's, we're going to be looking at another resin review from a company that really captured my attention a number of years ago, 2021 as a matter of fact, when we reviewed Apply Labworks Cyan. Cyan was a great resin because it supported easily, it cast really easily, it had an epic post-processing in that you just give it a quick wash. You didn't have to do post-curing or glycerin or any of those jump-through hoop type crap things. It's priced moderately well at $100 per kilo, and it printed on pretty much every single machine really easily. The support requirements for it weren't absolutely legendary like some of the ones that we've looked at in the much higher price bracket where you can print on that one single support point, but it was good enough. Like, you didn't have to have an entire forest of supports just to get a decent print. Cyan was also able to handle printing exceptionally thick models. We're talking like 1-inch solid thickness, and then of course cast properly without having a massive amount of expansion and breaking apart your plaster. It was able to handle rapid burnouts as well. Overall, it's just a great material. Again, I'm harping on about Cyan. We're not talking about Cyan in this video, but we are going to be talking about Apply Labworks' return to the castable scene, bestowing upon us a brand new casting resin called Castable Plus. Now, one incredibly important announcement that has to go along with this video, and the reason why I kept going on so much about Cyan, is that Cyan is actually being replaced by this resin. So unfortunately, if you are someone like me and you have come to rely on it, you will no longer be able to get Cyan. Castable Plus is going to be what they are moving into. They're only going to have one castable on hand, and it's going to become Castable Plus. So Cyan will be disappearing, which is very sad. I hate recommending things to people for so long, and of course, if you watch a previous video, you're still going to get that recommendation, and then if you miss it, there's going to be questions. It's going to be a bit of a kerfuffle for a little while, but we'll eventually get it all sorted out. But fret not, because that is partially why this channel exists, for us to review this resin for you and figure out if it's a good replacement for Cyan. Now, this is my bottle here. This is what I was sent. This is a nondescript bottle. They actually had it labeled as Castable Fast at one point, but they've since moved on from that name. This is actually what the bottle is going to look like. Pause for dramatic effect, but it is exactly the same formula. Something else that I'm super happy to report on is that Apply Labworks took a lot of people's feedback into account when they were designing this new resin. So let's go over all the reasons, how it's different, how it's similar, and in general, why this is actually probably going to be one of the better resin for us going forward. The first point is that compared to Cyan, it actually has a lower viscosity, meaning that when your build plate enters your resin vat and squishes down on the screen, displacing all that resin, it's not as thick. Trying to imagine like water versus, I don't know, like glue or syrup or something. The thicker the fluid is, the more it's going to take, the more pressure it's going to take to move it. This is a lower viscosity resin, therefore printing is going to be a little bit faster. Because the light-off delays that we usually set in our slicer to compensate and allow for that resin to settle can be shorter or almost non-existent. Again, this will depend entirely on what type of model you're using. You definitely still need to brush up on proper printing procedures. This isn't going to be a miracle resin, but it's very good and it is a step in the right direction. It also has less adhesion to the FEP, or whatever we're calling it now. There's so many different little acronyms, NFEP, FEP, PDMA, whatever. Whatever the clear plastic is on the bottom of your film, it is going to be peeling off of that even easier, so you won't hear that characteristic tick or tearing sound, specifically with the polymer resins and other such things. Basically what that means is that it's going to have less requirement for supports, so that it's not, when it lifts off, those supports don't have to have as much strength and support behind them to make sure that it doesn't just get sucked onto the FEP entirely. Adding to the fact that it has lower FEP adhesion, it also has improved tensile and elongation strength. This is something that we don't typically, I think, care too much about when it comes to casting resins. We want to know how well it burns and the ash, but we don't really pay too much attention to those. But Apply Labworks does their due diligence, and they sent me those test numbers comparing Cyan to Castable Plus, and it is a big improvement. That, again, just means that you can use fewer supports, smaller support heads, and it's not going to break off as much. And the proof for that is that it actually survives the single support test. So this is one of the small ones. You can see there it's got a single 1mm support, and it printed pretty much perfectly. There's a little bit of droop around the bottom, but again, this isn't supposed to be an example of a perfect print. This is an example of what should fail, and it didn't. Just to be safe, I would recommend just sticking with Cyan settings, basically having a 0.4mm support head minimum with 1mm parent shaft supports. I like to have a 0.5mm pad base for good adhesion and minimal resin waste. So yeah, start with those, but I have a feeling that you could bring it down to, say, 0.2 mil heads without too much problem, but keeping the same support density. Again, it really depends. Are you printing a dainty little engagement ring, or are you printing a massive strawberry? Now, as you can see, this resin is black, which is, I wouldn't say it's rare, but there aren't too many resins that are actually this color that are castable. Off the top of my head, the ones that come to mind are Power Resin Dark, Zero before it was discontinued, and then Solus Wax, which is something we've never reviewed because it is designed for the Solus Pro printer, which I think is like ancient by now, but it still seems to be for sale without any updates, which is interesting. But anyway, I really enjoy black for some reason. It just shows off all the details really beautifully, all the highlights. In my particular space, I have these hexagon 5000K lights, and I can see every single detail, every single divot on these strawberries. They look awesome. So overall, I really do enjoy dark resins. I think you will as well. It does mean, though, talking about the color, that we're going to have to do longer exposures. I'm not sure if you knew this, but the darker your pigment, the more UV it absorbs, which means that it doesn't, it requires more power, basically, to cure compared to a lighter colored resin. I don't know why most resins are like purple nowadays. Have you ever noticed how many casting resins are purple? We got Pac-10, there's Soraya, we've got Monocure, there's Violet from ResinWorks 3D. I know that for a fact that some pigments are from certain metals. You know, for example, white is titanium dioxide or oxide, I think. Yeah, oxide. And that means that you would have bits of metal in your burnout that are not going to disappear. So this one, obviously I don't know for a fact, I'm not a chemist. They could be using carbon black or something that's going to burn away and disappear. Total guess, by the way, I don't know if it's carbon based, but whatever this black is, it's definitely enhanced the print quality. It's going to make quality assurance better. Overall, I just really like it. Now, Castable Plus does have a slightly longer exposure time, as I mentioned regarding the color, compared to Cyan. Cyan on my SL1S, I would be using, I think it was 5.5 second layer exposures with a 30-second base and slow tilts. With Castable Plus, I'm using 8.5 seconds per layer, 30-second base, slow tilts. So aside from the exposure, I'm pretty sure that's the only major thing you're going to have to update with your profile. Again, as we've talked about already, the tensile strength, the FEP adhesion, all that stuff is improved. So you're not going to have slower retraction or slower lifts and slower retractions and all sorts of things. Just leave it the way it is and tweak it slowly as you go. Now, as per usual, the SL1S is a very unique machine. Not overly unique, actually, now that Elgu's kind of joined the tilt game, jumping on that bandwagon finally. But regarding the screens in particular, the SL1S still does have a tempered glass screen protector installed from the factory. So if you have a printer like the Sonic Mini 8KS, for example, you will have less than 8.5 second exposure times. That was just the exposures that I'm using on that particular printer. All right, so future Dan, something that I was not aware of when I recorded the main section of this video. Apparently, Apply Lab Work Castable Plus is going to be compatible with the Hagear's Reflex, which is mind-bogglingly cool. You use the same Pac-10 settings, that's this one right here. Use the same Pac-10 settings in this machine, and you should be able to print with Apply Lab Works Castable Plus, which is just like, that's all. Back to the video. Something that brings me much joy that I'm happy to report is that the washing and curing is as simple as Cyan was, being that you can wash it in ethyl alcohol or isopropyl alcohol, it does not matter. Just doing a quick rinse. It's very a fluid resin in that so it doesn't get caked into the details and corners. You put it in the washing bath and it just dissipates really quickly. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit more lenient. If you are someone who's used Cyan, maybe you've experienced this where the prints that are left out get a little bit greasy. There's like a clear film on them. That's actually the photo initiator, as far as I'm aware, leaching out of the print. And this is directly related to how long you wash for, which is why in the instructions for Cyan, they say just spray it with a spray bottle, don't dunk it, keep it less than 30 seconds, make it a very quick process before you dry it. The longer it's washed for, the more it's going to shrink, and the more likely you're going to get that leaching effect. With Castable Plus, they seem to have eliminated that, which is amazing. I still think you should do a very quick wash, avoid any chance of having shrinkage whatsoever, but I've left this exact print for at least a month, just sitting on my bench, and it's bone dry, it's not leaching, everything's perfect. I think they've solved that. Now, a little bit of a pro tip here. That photo initiator is actually what tends to create your casting issues. Basically, the resin on the surface isn't fully cured. And then when you pour in your plaster investment with the water, those two chemicals, the water and the photo initiator on the surface, they will interact, and it will prevent just the finest tiny little micron amount of investment from curing properly and getting to that fully hardened state. That's what leaves you with that asphalt texture on your castings. Now, I don't know exactly which photo initiator Cyan is using or used, but whatever it was, it wasn't really inhibiting my castings, because I do notably remember casting some that were still greasy. The biggest issue with that photo initiator grease is that it doesn't allow the wax to stick to the print. So more likely, you're going to pour in your investment. It might hit the model if you're not careful. That weight will be enough to just bend it and break it off. That was the biggest issue for me personally. But yeah, that's my little pro tip. If you ever find a print of any brand or make that's a little bit tacky or weepy, has that little grease on it, that's probably going to mean that you're not going to get a good casting out of it. But I just want to reiterate that Castable Plus, this new black one, does not have this issue at all, as far as I've found over my last month of testing. So this is just a non-issue with this particular resin. So all in all, this sounds pretty amazing. Honestly, it almost sounds too good to be true. Moving on to the casting though, things do get better. Castable Plus casts as well or better compared to Cyan. So as you can see here, again, I keep coming back to these models. This strawberry here, let me just break one off for you. This strawberry is easily 3/4 of an inch thick, solid resin. When I go to cast this, I know that every single one of these little divots on the surface is going to come out perfectly, because it doesn't seem to have any thermal expansion, or at least above normal levels of thermal expansion that Plasticast or Optima Prestige haven't been able to handle. But moving away from my work to something that's more empirically comparative that we've done on this channel, I of course have the standard test models here. Now, one of the areas that I see the most issue regarding thermal expansion and casting issues is on this ring here. This is the open source gear ring. It has engraving on the surface that is very deep with very hard 90-degree corners, meaning that if it's going to break, it's going to break right there, and I will have casting issues with it. But the casting is absolutely perfect, except for some bubbles, which are my fault, because I think I had something in this flask as well that was hollow, printed hollow, but going to be cast solid, meaning that if I vacuumed it too long, I was risking having it burst, and I didn't want to have that. So I under vacuumed a little bit, and some of the bubbles got inside, but that's something that if I did this again, I would not see the same result. So let's go backwards, moving on from the open source Signet down the line in terms of heavy models. Taking a look at the skull, The casting on this skull is phenomenal. Again, a couple of little bubbles, my fault, but the surface quality is flawless. I don't see a single break. This was, I'm just looking at the supports. I think this was one of the medium level supports, and it's perfect. Like there's nothing else to say. It's flawless. Looking at the signet ring, the smaller signet ring, this one is solid. I almost always see issues along the sides of the shank or on the top. Something usually comes out a little bit rough, and the only rough spot I see are a little bit on the sides here, but that would come off with like a 400 grit. There's almost nothing going on. The engagement ring, again, flawless. One bubble. I only see one bubble. Every prong came out. I don't see any surface texture anywhere. It's just perfect. All I'd have to do is deal with some of these support marks on the bottom. The micro pave ring, another great test because this again shows off that thermal expansion. We want to make sure that every single seat comes out. And once again, bubbles, my fault, but they are all there. And I bet you those bubbles would just pop right off. But I can look right through each one of the stone settings and see behind it, and not a single one is filled in. So this is, again, flawless. And then the last one is the tiny engagement ring. No big surprise. This one turned out perfect as well. I see a smidge of texture up here, but it's not a big deal. And again, it would sand off with like 400 grit. So all in all, amazing castings, amazing prints. Everything about it is just perfect. It's better than what I could ever hope for at this price point of resin. Now, for those of you who were using Cyan, this is probably the best part about this whole situation. As bad as it is that you now have to switch away from a resin that you've gotten to know, it does remain the same price point at $100 per kilo. So your budget, your quotes, everything is going to be exactly the same, which is amazing. Thank you so much, Apply Labs, for making that work. I recall they did ask me what kind of price point, and I was like, the cheaper the better, because who wants to pay more for anything? And they delivered. Again, they managed to deliver. So I'm extremely happy. Thank you so much, Kevin and Apply Labworks, for doing that and making that happen in a world of crazy inflation. And then the icing on top of the cherry, on top of the icing on top of the cake, or something, we actually have some discount codes provided by Apply Labworks for the first 100 bottles sold. It's going to be $20 off, which is no small amount. Now, I don't have any way of tracking when those first 100 bottles sell, but try the discount code anyway, because you might get lucky, especially on the launch day of this video, because we're going to try to correspond this video launch with the launch of the resin. As of the recording of this video, I don't know what that discount is, but we're going to have that magically down here on the screen. Now, if you want first dibs on codes like this one, or many others that I'm sure we will have in the future, you might want to consider checking out our membership program, because those subscribers get early access to our videos. Usually it's 1 or 2 days of head start, but not dramatic. And you'll get early access to all of our videos and access to some more director's cuts. Sometimes I go on little tangents, and we kind of opt to edit those out because you don't want to be watching a movie. But early access to videos does mean early access to codes. So if that interests you, consider that membership program. You can also, of course, talk with me on our Discord, and it comes with many other perks as well. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it insightful and helpful in making an informed decision about your next resin choice. And my recommendation now flows from Cyan into Castable Plus very squarely. Definitely give this resin a try. We are scoring it very highly on our ranked list. It's going to have like a 10 out of 10 when it comes to the printability, because it was just so easy, hit the ground running. Castability, easily a 9.5 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10. I'm just trying to be realistic, with that little 0.5%, because every single resin is going to have slight issues here and there. But by and large, this is an incredibly good material, and I definitely recommend you pick up a bottle. If you wouldn't mind dropping a like, and if you're interested in this kind of content, subscribe as well, because I've now gotten through a very busy summer on my end. I do apologize that we've been a little bit behind on videos, but I had to host a family thing. I had to put a new roof on my bathroom and my shop, and a jeweler is very far from a roofer, so I kind of taught myself how to do that, and so many other summer projects having to do with buying this house. We are very squarely now past the point where we have obligations, so we're going to be pivoting right back to content creation, and I have 5 videos on the go right now. So we're going to have a very action-packed, full later half of 2025, and you won't want to miss it. So I will see you guys in the next video.